Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen. Amma ba'd, fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Rasulullah, wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Habiballah. As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Nabiy Allah, wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Nur Allah. Excellence of reciting salutations upon the beloved and blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wasallam, the person who recites 3 times Durood and Salam in the morning and 3 times in the evening. Insha'Allah, God willing, his minor sins will be forgiven. Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Our government will uphold human rights and democracy across the world. We will address that in the context of Israel and Palestine. What we see now, our government simply failing to implement its own state of policy. Our leaders have a policy of 2-state solution, but we do not recognize Palestine as a state. Ministers refuse to even use its name. We have a policy of peace process, but we have no appetite to initiate or prioritize one. We have a policy that settlement buildings is illegal and contrary to international law. Yet there is no consequence wherever more and more settlers supported by Israel governments and diaspora groups occupy more and more land in Palestine. We do nothing to deter Israel from expanding settlements, forced eviction and home demolitions. This is ethnic cleansing and is denying the reality of the state of Palestine to even exist. Our policies is that Eastern Jerusalem is an integral part of a future Palestinian state, and yet we do nothing as extremists barge into homes, terrorizing Palestinian families and killing young children who have lived there for generations. Our policies is to defend human rights, but no action follows as hundreds of Palestinians' children every year are arrested, mistreated and incarcerated. Our policy is supporting international accountability and funding the International Criminal Court, but we oppose International Criminal Court's investigation into war crimes in Palestine. Our leaders and the people of power fail to implement our own policies. We send out a message to an ever extremist right-wing Israel government that there will be no cost or consequences for its treatment of the Palestinians. This total impunity is feeding Israel prolific rise in far-right extremism, leaving a society fighting for its very soul. Of 10, when we look at periods in history that we are so overwhelming, unjust, so clearly unfair, and where in retrospect we see appalling human rights abuses and cruelty, the way we rationalize the lack of action at the time is by saying we would have done more if only we knew then what we know now. So we want to put the record that we know now, so that there can be no doubt in future generations that we know about the dispossessions in Sheikh Jarrah, about the chance to death of Arabs in Jerusalem, about the attacks on worshippers in Masjid al-Aqsa, about the attacks outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We know in the West Bank, Palestinians and Israeli settlers live side by side, the former illegally but under military law without the most basic of utilities. The latter 630,000 strong, growing illegally present, yet governed by civilian law and living in relative luxury, two peoples in the same land but with different legal systems and even separate roads to the same place. So we know, as documented by human rights, watch, the threshold has passed for the international war crime of apartheid and prosecution. We know that a female journalist who's worked for a TV channel was attacked by Israeli soldiers. We know, as reported by news, of entirely unnecessary proactive behavior by Israeli police and military at Damascus Gate, with strong grenades thrown at peaceful groups of Palestinians, and Bethlehem, where volleys of tear gas were used. We know from Amnesty International the rising death toll in Gaza, entire families wiped out in attacks that we will be tried as war crimes. We know from the UN the mounting destruction by Israel, strikes on homes, hospitals, libraries and charities. You know about the incitement of hated and official Israeli government platforms only this week on social media, posting verses from the Quran over a photo of bombs dropping in Gaza in an offensive attempt to argue that Palestinian destruction was ordained in Islam. We know over the past week, Israeli soldiers have shot dead more Palestinians, children, in the West Bank. And we know that there will be zero accountability for this appalling violence. And our silence in the face of this makes our position. We all know, and in conclusion, we urge the government and the people of power to stop responding to narrow political interests and listen to the Palestinians who stand to call for an end to occupation, to Israeli Jewish human rights organizations such as Beth Salem, and to the ex-Israeli soldiers of breaking the silence, who in the face of horrendous abuse continue to speak the truth and point out how there is no military solution. We urge the leaders across the UK and some parts of the world, the daily aggression of occupation and checkpoints, and we ask friends, what can they say today about Palestinians who want occupation to end? How do we ensure that our policies of the two-state solution is not simple fig leaf policy to hide in action, but in reality for the people of Palestine? Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. My dear Islam brothers and viewers of social media, as we know, when we look at social media videos, it's unbearable to see what is happening around the globe, especially with Muslims. And we request the people of power to look into Kashmir as well as Palestine. And at the moment, for Muslims around the globe, the situation is very bad. And all we can do is send out a voice at this minute to our leaders, the people of power, to take action as soon as possible to human rights. May Allah Azza wa Jalla accept this short message that I have delivered for the sake of Almighty God. May Allah Azza wa Jalla develop fear in the leader's heart for Almighty God and the punishment of accountability on the Day of Judgment, that we all have to give account. So for our leaders who are quiet, we request you to please resolve these matters in Palestine and in Kashmir. Ameen. Bijahin Nabil Ameen. Sallallahu ta'ala ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.